everyone. Today in the workshop, we are going to be doing part 2 of a series that we started a week or two ago with the custom Tau paint job. If y'all remember, there was a group of people that I got introduced to that were just getting into wargaming, just getting into 40K, just getting into miniature painting in general. And I offered to paint a couple of their miniatures so that I could show them how I do my painting with the techniques and whatever, so that they could then go and hopefully replicate that. We started off with a couple of Tau infantry for Warhammer 40K. This week we are doing a couple of Thousand Suns Chaos Marines. And so as we did last time, I had them paint up what they would like as far as the paint scheme and the specific colors. They sent me these images. There's the front and there's the back. And so I'm going to take those ideas and see what I can do with them. So let's get started. All right, so I was trying to figure out how to start with this Thousand Suns miniatures. These guys are kind of unique in that they have so much gold. It's like just gold and blue, and that's the majority of everything. So I thought, just because there's so much gold, maybe I would prime them in gold and then paint the blue. And then I thought, it's always better, like I've always said, it's always better to start low and work up. So then I thought I might prime them in blue, but the sample that I got and the color that was chosen was Citadel Blue Horror, which does not come in a spray. So I'm just going to treat this like a regular old miniature. I started with, I'm going to prime it, or I did prime it with Army Painter Uniform Gray, which is kind of my go-to prime. And we're just going to start laying in some of the blue horror in the blue areas. So want to definitely make sure that you have your paint a little thin, because it's much better to do a couple of thin layers and have them be nice and smooth than it is to try and cover it with one coat and have it be all gloppy and horrible looking. So we're just going to lay in the blue horror color in all of the open blue areas, and then we will come back and see how it looks. All right, so I have a couple of coats of blue horror on him, and everything looks nice and smooth and has covered really well. So our next step is going to be doing the joint areas, the black joint areas. And for that, we are going to use Citadel Abaddon Black, which is, I believe, the right way to pronounce that. I think I've been pronouncing it wrong. So let's get in and get, now this should not take multiple coats because this covers pretty well. So we're going to just get in and get these joint areas done. We're not going to be terribly concerned with overpainting, because the next step we're going to do is the gold, which will take some time, and we can just fix any mistakes with the black at that point. All right, that looks pretty good. I also got the loincloth in the front and the hoses on the backpack and the exhausts for the jetpack. So far so good. All right, all the blue areas and the black areas are all done, and now it is time to get stuck in and do the gold. This is the big portion, besides the blue, obviously. So for the gold, we are going to be using Citadel Retributor armor, and we want to thin this a little bit, but not too much, because we should get a good coating in one go, which is nice because this part typically takes a while. So let's get stuck in and get this done.
Many unbearable hours later.
Well, that's finished. Realistically, that actually took a little bit over an hour to do all of that gold work, but you know, I expected that. So it came out really nice. I went back and did some touch-ups on the black areas, and there was a little bit of touch-up I needed to do on the blue, but we're all ready to go. So our next phase is we're going to be doing the accent colors on these exhaust nodules and these little bits on the backpack. And for that, we are going to be using Citadel Screamer Pink. And once that's done, that should be all of the base colors that we need to put down. So we'll start doing our washes, and then we'll get into doing the highlighting. So we're just going to get this done and let it dry. All right, we got all of the red areas. Well, I call it red, it's Screamer Pink, but we got all those areas done. We're going to let all of that dry, and then we're going to move on to doing all of the base color washes. Okay, we are all dry and we're ready to start doing the washing. So I'm going to cover the gold area first because that's going to be the largest areas we're going to do washing on. The blue, we're just going to be doing edge washing and highlighting, so I'm not going to worry about that. So for the gold area, we are going to be using Citadel Reikland or Reikland Fleshtone. That's going to give the gold a little bit of warmth, as well as doing the, shading the recesses and stuff. So this isn't going to take quite as long as doing the initial base coat, but we're going to give this a nice wash. Usually start with the shoulders here. You can see it gives it a really nice bit of warmth and fills in all of those recesses. So we're going to go ahead and just finish up all the gold, and then we'll move on to doing the washes for the Screamer Pink areas. All right, our initial wash on the gold is done. I'm going to put the wash on the Screamer Pink areas. For that, we're using our old friend Citadel Nuln oil. I'll get those washed and then we'll let the whole thing dry completely and we'll start on the highlight work. All right, so everything is dried. The washes have all set. So we're going to start doing some highlighting. The first area we're going to do is all the gold. We're going to be doing 2 passes of highlighting. Our first pass is going to be done with Citadel Liberator Gold. And all we're doing with this are going to be doing some line highlighting right on the edges of things. So you want to think of it in terms of if there's a light source coming from the top of the model, where would that light be hitting? So all we're going to be doing is putting a little patch of Liberator Gold, which is slightly lighter than the Retributor Gold or the Retributor Armour. And we're just going to be putting lines down on the highlighted areas. So let's get this done and then we will move on to the pinpoint highlighting. So our first highlighting pass is done. It looks really good. We're going to do our second pass, which is just going to be pinpoint highlights. And for that, we're going to be using Citadel Stormhost Silver. And I think for me, this is kind of what really makes the gold pop, because all we're going to be doing is taking our Stormhost Silver and literally just finding, let's see if I can zoom in just a little bit more. Just going to be finding corners and dotting them. And little bits on the very tops of things. And that's going to give just that little point of shiny reflection that I think absolutely makes this look fantastic. So we're going to go through all of this and hit all those high points. And then I'm going to do some cleanup on the blue if need be, and then we'll be back for the next step. All right, we are getting close to finishing this guy up. I'm going to do a couple of small area highlights. First one we're going to do is the Screamer Pink, the highlights on all the Screamer Pink areas, these jetpack areas on the back, and a little bit on the detailing for the rifle. And since we laid in the Nuln oil on top of the original Screamer Pink base, all we're going to do is come back in with Screamer Pink and just lighten up some of the highlight areas. That should be sufficient for these areas. So all we're going to do is just come in and put some highlighted areas on here on the bulbs or the globes, and also a little stripe on the nozzle area, and that will be good enough to get these looking good. And then some little striping on these box areas. And then once we're done with this, we're going to do the black areas. Yeah, this won't take very long. All right, that should do it for the backpack. And then just a little edge highlighting for this area. We're going to come in and define these little runes on the rifle later with another color, but I just want to get a little bit of highlight in here for now. All right, clean up our brush, and then let's get started with the black areas. So the first color we're going to be laying in for the black areas is Citadel Eshin Gray. So this is just going to be mainly for the loincloth and the hoses in the back and the nozzle on the gun. So we're just going to lay in some lines of Eshin Gray. And then we're going to come back over with those. We're going to come back later with a lighter gray and go on top of that. All right, and then just a couple of dots for the muzzle on the weapon. And then we're just going to dot some areas on the backpack, on the hoses on the backpack. All right, now for the final touch for the black areas, we're going to be using Citadel Dawnstone. It's a lighter gray, and we're just going to be doing a little bit smaller areas in the same way we did with the Stormhost Silver. We're just going to be hitting smaller areas to just make them pop. I just want to give it a little more. And then a couple of dots on the muzzle. And then the same thing on the backpack details. We're just going to literally be dotting areas to help give a little bit more definition to the highlights. I forgot to do the back of the loincloth and the these articulated areas on the backs of the knees. So I'm going to go in back in with the Eshin gray. And then we'll give them a moment to dry, and I'll just put in a dot of the Dawnstone. And then the black areas will be all done. All right. I'm going to let those dry fully, and then we're going to do the shading on all of the blue areas. So we'll be back. Okay, we are closing in on the last couple of things we need to do to complete this Thousand Suns Chaos Space Marine. Our next step is we're going to be doing the shadowing work on all of the blue areas. Now, it took me a little while to figure out a good color for the shadowing for this, because it's kind of an interesting color, this particular blue. So what I came up with is a combination. We're going to be making a glaze, and if you've seen some of my other videos, you know what that means and how we use it. But for this one, we're going to be using 1 part Citadel Space Wolves Gray Contrast, 1 part Lahmian Medium, and 1 part of water. The idea is we're going to get a thin, watery color that we're going to apply in layers and slowly build them up. That way we can control how much paint we put down, and we can build up the colors until we get the exact effect that we want. And for this, all we're going to be doing, I'm going to start with the shoulder pads here. All we're going to be doing is laying in a bit of color around the edges for the shadowing. Now, I don't know if you can see it on camera, very, very faint, but we're going to be laying in multiple layers until we build up the color that we want. Now, when I'm doing glazing work, especially when we're glazing all around a whole miniature like this, is I find the best thing to do is start in one place, work around the entire miniature, and then by the time you get back to your starting point, that's dry and you can do another layer. So I'm just going to go ahead and start putting in layers of this glaze in all of the crevices. We want it to work just like a regular shade, just the crevices and the darker spots to help pull a little contrast. So I'm going to go ahead and just work my way around this thing until I get a layer of paint that I'm happy with, and then we'll move on. We are so close to being done. We just have one other thing to do before we start working on the base. So our last little bit is we're going to put some green glow in the helmet eye sockets and in the eyes of the animal on the rifle, and then in these little runes. So the first thing we're going to do is lay down a layer of Citadel White Scar, and that's going to give us a nice base and will help make the green color even more pronounced. So we're just going to dab that in there. And then for the bird, or the, looks like a bird. And then a little bit for these runes here. I'm going to come back and do some cleanup on this when I'm done. All right, and we're going to give those a little bit to dry, and then our top coat is going to be Citadel Moot Green. I really like this green. Use it a lot for my orcs, which you'll see in another video. All right, and so all we're going to do is just get some brush on our paint, and we're just going to lay in this color on top of the green. And that's that. And now I'm going to take a little bit of my Retributor armor and just go back and do some cleanup lines around the greens I just put in, just to tighten them up a bit. I want just a little of the green to come through, not a huge blotch. There we go. Much better. And let's do the same for the rifle. And then we're going to do the same with the rune area, but we're going to go back with our Screamer Pink and clean up those lines. There we go. Looks pretty good. Now, there is one other thing we're going to get to. Before we do the base, I just remembered we're going to do some gem work on this piece on the backpack. So let's get that done and then we can finish up the base. All right, so we're going to do a little bit of gem effect work. And I think I'm going to, well, I'm definitely going to do it on this little oval piece here. But I think I will also do a little bit on the oval piece at the top of the headdress. So there are many ways to create this effect. The first thing you're going to want to decide is what color you're going to want the gem. I'm going to do mine kind of a reddish brown. So I think I will bring back, the first thing I'm going to do is bring back the Screamer Pink and just lay in a base coat on these two areas. So we're just going to put in the base coat. Like that. And then also on this little gem on the front. All right. I'm going to let those dry, and then I'm going to use my Nuln oil and put a dark wash over them because we want them to be very dark for the gem effect. We don't want it to be super saturated or bright. So let me check those. And this should give me a nice dark effect. All right, so our wash has dried. So now we're just going to go in and start doing the effects. And the idea is that this is like a clear gemstone. So the other thing we have to decide is where the light is going to hit the top of the stone. I'm going to have the light hit in the upper left-hand area here. So that's where we're going to end up putting our little white dot. So in the opposite side here is where we're going to have the reflected light from the inside of the stone. So since the stone is reddish, we're going to lay in, for this I'm using Citadel Evil Sun's Scarlet, and I'm also using AK Deep Yellow. This is one of my favorite yellows. So the idea is we're going to lay in a little bit of the darker color, the darker reflected color on this other side. And then we're going to blend a little bit of the yellow to kind of make a graduated reflection. Like a nice gradient. So this might take some practice. You just practice on spare sprues or anything you've got lying around. But you want to get a nice little effect. There we go. That's looking better. I'm going to put a little bit more yellow. And then a little dot of intense yellow. That's not too bad. Now we're going to try to do the other one. Now this one's a lot smaller, so I'm going to have to be a lot more careful. And like I said, this is a great thing to just practice on spare pieces of plastic or whatever you have lying around, because part of the trick is the blending. So you want to make sure your paints are a little bit thinner so that they will blend easier. See, that one looks pretty good. I think I'm going to leave that one just the way it is because I kind of like that one. Let me check the one on the back. I'm going to add a little bit more yellow to this one. There we go. There we go. So now, for the final touch, I'm going to bring in my white scar. And all we're doing is putting a little white dot diagonally on the other side of the gem from where we just did our blending. Just like that. And let me do another one on the other side. Just like that. Now, I also, after I'm completely finished with this model and I have top coated it with a matte varnish, I will probably go in and put a little gloss over the top of those because it helps give it that nice shiny reflective effect. But I'm happy with the way those came out, and now we're going to move on to doing our base. All right, we are ready to start on the base. So as with the Tau that I did in the last video, I'm going to be using AK Terrain's Dark Earth as the basis for these guys' bases. I just open up the can and just take a little bit off the lid. This stuff is pretty thick, kind of like a paste. And so we're going to apply this. It's not going to be so much painting as it's just going to be kind of stippling. Just laying down some of this paste on the base. We don't want it to be ultra smooth or anything. We want it to be kind of gloppy looking because that's going to help it have some nice raised areas and lowered areas. But all we're doing at this point is just covering the whole top. I'm not doing the sides. That's a personal choice. Some models I do the entire base with the terrain stuff. Some I think looks nicer to just have the top done and then have the ring painted black or some other color. That's personal choice. And there, he's all done. So we're going to let that dry, and then we'll come in and do a wash and a couple of highlights. All right, our base texture is nice and dry, and so we're going to be putting a wash on this to do the same thing that we use a wash on the miniature for, to kind of get in the cracks and give a little bit of contrast. And we're going to be using Citadel Agrax Earthshade for this. And this is going to be a really quick step. All we're going to do is get our big brush in there and just lay this on. And it's going to flow into the cracks. And then we'll give that a chance to dry. And then we're going to do a couple of different colors for our highlighting. Here we go. Easy peasy. All right, we're going to let that dry. All right, we are at the final stage of our Thousand Suns Chaos Space Marine. We're going to do a couple of colors of dry brush highlighting on the base. The first one we're going to be doing is Citadel Baneblade Brown, and that's going to be our darker dry brush. I'm using my circular dry brush for this. I like using the circular one for flat surfaces because I can kind of do it in a circular motion, and I think it makes it look a little better. So all we're going to do is come in and just hit this thing. Now we don't want to press too hard because we don't want to paint the entire surface. We're just trying to hit the highlights. That looks pretty good. We want to get a nice even coverage. That looks good. So our next color, we're going to go a little bit lighter. We're going to do Citadel Wraithbone. So that'll be our highest or our lightest dry brush color. So we're going to do the same thing. We got our round dry brush loaded up with paint. Get most of it off on the paper towel, and then we're doing the same thing, but this time we're going to be almost just letting the weight of the brush. We don't want to press at all because we just want to get the very tops of things. So we're looking for just a little coverage on the very tops and a nice combination of the color of the texture, the Baneblade brown, and the Wraithbone. So I think this looks pretty good. Yeah. And so now that that's done, our next to the last step, we're going to take this guy off the holder, and we're going to come in with our Abaddon black, and we're going to just do the outside ring of the base, just to give it a nice clean finish. And like I said before, how you do the texturing for your base is completely up to you. I just like to be consistent. If I'm doing just the top or the whole thing, doesn't matter as long as it's consistent throughout my squads or my armies or what have you. So we're just going to finish this up all the way around. There we go. See, that gives it a nice finished look. I like how that looks. So while I'm cleaning up here, we've got one last small thing to do. And that's to add a couple of tufts of grass, just to give the base a little something extra. So I've got my white glue here. I'm just going to dab a couple of random areas with a little bit of white PVA. I usually do maybe one in the front and one in the back. And then we're going to take our handy dandy tweezers and we're just going to grab one of these tufts off the card and lay it on here. Press down so it sticks. And then another one, maybe slightly larger. And lay it on there. Oops. Sometimes they stick to the tweezers. And lay it down. And that's it. We have a finished Thousand Suns Chaos Space Marine. So I'm going to let this guy dry up. We're going to give him a top coat of matte varnish. I'm going to do the glossy bits to the gems, and then we'll see how he looks all finished up. All right, and here we have our finished Thousand Suns Chaos Space Marines. I'm really pleased with how these guys came out. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for joining me in another one of my painting tutorials, and I hope to see you in our next video. Take care. Bye-bye.